Alright, work on a favorite bike here again, the Swift belt drive saga. So we're fixing a belt drive by we're putting a chain drive on it. That'll take care of the belt drive issue. So no more broken belts. And there's a brand new BDL belt drive right there available, whoever wants to buy it. Okay, so what we're doing is we are converting it over to a chain from a belt. So they had a Delcron inner primary on here, which is right here. And they had a outer cover that is over here on it. That is for your early starter mechanism, which we don't have anymore. This here is an early starter mechanism. It has a big hole, big sleeve that goes inside that big bushing, and it has a bigger sleeve here that goes inside the big hole right here. So this is a 90 to 93 style starter setup. The clutch over there is off a 98 to 06, so it doesn't match up. So this is a 94 and later cover, which has the small hole in here, but the bushing's not in it. And it also has a 3-bolt design right here for bolt the primary cover on. That ties the inner and outer cover together, makes it stronger. So this Delcron luckily had the standoffs for the late cover, but it uses the early starter, so that doesn't work. So it's kind of a mismatch, hodgepodge thing. This has a belt drive ball bearing in here, which we can't use with chain drive. Well, you could, but it doesn't last, so stupid to do that. So we're going to put a roller bearing on it. This is the one-piece jack shaft. I think this one's a spike. Nope, it's an all balls. All balls makes this one. Spike also has one. So when you put this all on there correctly, this does not use the inner bushing, so that's no longer a problem. This has the 10-tooth gear, which matches the late ring gear, which I think they're 108s or 6s or something. And this has a small diameter shaft on it, so we can buy it for this setup. If you get the earlier tooth for the early basket, then it has the big shaft. When you have this particular setup, you have to go this way. So this is basically all late model parts, but we have early model part. We have early stuff, not late. So I eliminated the use of this, which took care of that problem, but I can't use that primary cover, I have to use that primary cover. Or you have to make an adapter inside of it to put a small bush in a bigger hole. Cost of doing that versus putting another cover on it, about the same. But it's quicker to not have to make more parts. So that problem takes care of itself. And this is a spring-loaded device here that springs out and will engage like that. Goes all the way out with a starter engaged in the back of the tranny. It comes out about that far, which fits. In resting conditions over here, you got your 1/8 inch clearance at least. We're good. Goes like that. Alright, so I should take care of the starter issue. The clutch basket's on the main shaft. The main shaft has a little bit of bad splines in it, so it kind of wobbles a little bit. Very common. And that affects our offset to our chain a little bit. This is a 1-inch offset bike because of the wide tire back here. So instead of using the stock nut and inner sleeve here piece, coupler, whatever you want to call this thing, I forget. I use this an aftermarket 1-inch offset and the longer nut to do it, so it moves the whole stock compensator, moves it all out, so it'll work on a 1-inch offset application. The primary is stock width, and there's a spacer somewhere around here. Yeah, somewhere. I don't know what happened to it. It was laying here. Anyway, there's a, oh, there's dumbass, it's on the bike. There's the 1-inch spacer that offsets over, so you can use a stock primary cover. And I'm going to use the format gaskets here instead of O-rings to make sure it stays pretty oil tight. We don't want any leaks if we can avoid it. This bike has always had a weird offset sprocket deal because I had to cut down all these spacers to make the belt drive work. And as usual, it still has weird stuff. So the stock spacer is a 200 thou offset for the late bike, which is this one. That's supposed to go back in there. And when you put that on there, put your straight edge on here, you're about the full width of this tooth off almost. So I wound up going from a 200 thou or 220, whatever those are, down to 125 there. When I did that, the nut bottoms out on the shaft instead of tightening everything up, so that doesn't work. So I wound up putting 125 thou or 155 thou spacer here to allow the nut to tighten up the whole sprocket assembly instead of just being tight on the shaft. When you're just tight on the shaft, all this stuff is loose. So you always want to make sure when your nut's tight, it's actually tightening against what it's supposed to and not what you think it is. So anyway, so that's all in there correctly. Now when you put your straight edge in here and drop it in, it lines up. Now, obviously it's drop in, it would be anything because you can change around quite a bit, see. So what you do is you drop it down in the hole and you put tension on this and you rotate the basket up and down. You watch how it drops onto the front sprocket. See it rubs, see how it moves over about 30 thou or so when it comes down. That's when you're in this position. When you rotate it over here and do the same thing, see now it hits on the other side, and you got a gap on this side. See the gap down in there now? You know, there's a gap in there. So we're kind of in the middle of the wobble. So that means our offset's about correct, the average. Now chains have a little bit of slop on the two, so that gives you some wiggle room in there for being off, about 30 thou. So with this thing walled around like it is, we're taking up that gap right here. Alright, so what I don't know yet is I have not put the inner primary on here yet to see if it's going to rub on the chain shoe right here, because this goes inside of here, down there, and if the chain sits in too far, it will rub against the inside the tensioner there and eat itself up. So I don't know if that's going to be a problem yet. We haven't got that far. Right now I'm just mocking everything up without the primary being away so I can actually see stuff. Get tired of fighting myself. So for right now everything looks like it's lined up on this part. We're going to have to check on that to make sure it works. Next thing is we're going to put a roller bearing on here, the stock setup, which is right here. Old Taiwan Teddy parts, good stuff. So there's your roller bearing. A roller bearing will take 10 times the load of a ball bearing. These will not live very long. You know how rough that is? And that's basically that part's not very old. I just put that in not that long ago. So this one here will take the load no problem. This one takes a sleeve, which is right here. The Harley sleeve goes straight all the way. It can be wherever it wants to be. This one here is a copy of the S&S one, which has a limiter on it, so it can only go in so far. It has a snap ring groove out, it tapers. And the main shaft will hit on the taper there, and it can't go in too far. So normally you just tap these on with a hammer, no big deal. Just use this tool right here. So bap, 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 you're on there. The problem is this is a 6-speed conversion tranny, and the main shaft bearing in there is held on with two little crappy little retainers, real small sheet metal retainers, and they bend over. That's the problem we had before. When the whole clutch assembly is too far in, I take the tranny apart, move it back, bend the retainers back. So we don't want to do that again. So I'm going to heat this up with a torch, get it pretty hot, and hopefully it'll slip right on all the way. If not, then I'll see if I can use the clutch nut with a big stack of washers, nut spacers to pull the nut on, or in this case push it on. I don't want to beat on it. So that's basic. I got to do that next. And then we'll put the inner primary on it and see if the chain's going to work and all the other things. So there's where we're at right now. So we don't know. Now this is a whole assembly here I bought off of eBay. So I saved a ton of money by buying this used stuff. It's a pretty low mileage looking unit. So hopefully the clutch is good. We'll find out. If the clutch is bad, then we'll put a clutch in it. But we're going to try to use a stock clutch for now. Customer doesn't ride very hard, so if he can get away with a stock clutch, he'll save himself about 240 bucks for a Barnett plate kit. So trying to save money where we can. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. So now I'm going to go ahead and take all this apart, and I'm going to try installing this. So that's what we're going to do. We'll be back. Alright, we're back. Got my tripod set up. So now I'll go ahead and take this thing apart. See what we got here. First thing I do is pull the motor sprocket off, simple. So there's our 1-inch offset piece. And this is a special 1-inch longer nut that you use also. So I'm going to put this together without the washer to show you what happens when you tighten the nut up and this is still loose. Because there's a shoulder over here that you bottom out on. See the shoulder right here? You're not supposed to bottom against the shoulder, you're supposed to be bottoming out against that shoulder there. So if you don't have enough spacing in there, it will bottom out on the wrong part. So this is part of it, so we'll put that piece in there. You see how many threads we got here, almost 1 inch. That's your first clue there might be a problem. Okay, it's tight now. So you're running down the road, we're good to go. Right? Wrong. See how loose that is? So this will allow your alternator to spin the splines off it. It'll allow your main bearings to separate on the crank, which makes the motor knock and act like it's got a bad crank in it. Because I have had motors come in with that problem. And you have all these looseness. Same thing happens when the nut gets loose over here. So you tighten this all up and the motor's rebuilt. Imagine that. Alright, so now we're going to put our spacer in there. So when right now it's full tight, we can see how much of a gap we got. So you take your spacer and you look at your spacer, and if the spacer is fatter than this gap, you're golden. So we're going to use that one. Now I could also use the one in here, that's the stock one that came out of here, but then I'd lose that much thread. So I'd rather have that extra thread. I like lots of thread in my parts. And this is supposedly a hot rod motor, 113, so theoretically you want as much air as you can get. So you put that on there, that one. You take this washer, put it on here, put it back together. Now we're nice and tight, see it doesn't move anymore. Now it's torqued like it's supposed to. So that's how you check stuff. Okay. Pull our snap ring off over here. We checked our clutch up here, made sure the clutch lever all worked up in here. See, it works like that. Made sure the clutch release down here, like that. And if I didn't have my other hand here, I could actually spin the inner hub, so it works. So the clutch is releasing like it's supposed to and working, so we're not going to tear it apart. It should be good to go. But I will check these bolts, make sure they're tight, because I don't trust anybody. Okay, so that was a mock-up for that length. So you mock up all these things beforehand, and you don't have to deal with it later when it's hard to work on everything. Unless you want to. Ring. Your adjustment screw comes out. Here's your push rod that was in there. And socket. Left-handed thread on this bike. Come off all the way up. And this should just come right off. Oh, look at that. Not like a belt driver, you gotta fight all day, huh? Okay, so that came right out like it's supposed to. Now the reason this thing wobbles, either this is bent, the edge of this shoulder right here is not perpendicular to the shaft, which means 90 degrees to it. So if it's just 1 degree off this way, the clutch will go like that as you rotate it. Or the shaft itself can be bent, which does not look like it is. But so these splines here have had some issues before. I had to hand file these to get the belt drive going off, so there's issues involved. So anyway, there's some problems with that shaft, but most every Harley out there has problems with the shaft, so nothing new about that. Okay, so now I'll clean this up right here a little bit. So you can see the shoulders right here. That's what this hits up against. It keeps from going in any further than probably about right there. You're supposed to have an 1/8 of an inch gap minimum between here and here. when you see these all the way jammed in the seal, usually they start leaking oil. And see the stock one, there's no limits, you can go past the edge. So this one will not do that. And it looks like it's going to go in there tight, so gotta do something about that. So I don't want to beat on it because it's a flimsy ass tranny. We don't like flimsy ass trannies. Alright, so I'm going to put a torch on this part, heat it up, and tap it in. I'm going to get my hammer out. Just got to tap it just a little bit. Okay, that's got to get out of my way so I can work over here. Yeah, good shot of me. Whoopee. We don't want to look at me. There's torches are now over here right now. So. Who would think you'd have a torch set when you work on Harleys? I use them all the time. Let's see, I need some hot gloves too. So these are my gloves that I wear for being hot. Kevlars. I can hold on to hot stuff for a short time before I start to burn. That is, unless you pick it up where the hole is, then it burns real quick. I have a habit of doing it that way because it's more popular for me. Alright, so there you go. I'm thinking a set of pliers would be a nice thing to have right now. So we got ourselves a set of pliers here too. There you go. I won't get so hot now. This is not a weld area. I'd be over on that bench. Okay. Now this will turn yellow at about 4.5, 500 degrees. By 600 it's definitely yellow, and then you go about 650 to 7, it turns blue. When it goes blue, you're really starting to affect the heat treat. Yellow, you're affecting it lightly, but not too bad. But you start seeing blue, you're having problems. Up a little bit. See how hot it is. You're going to start smoking real good with 500-600 degrees. Not 500, 400 to 500 degrees. Trying to get a little yellow on the edge there. It's time to put on. She went all the way on, first shot. Perfect. No hesitation at all. I could have probably not heated up quite as much. I went maximum temperature, turned it yellow, but not blue. Oh, I did get a little blue right there. Fogging some blue. So we were at 650 to 7 there probably. Yeah, probably a little under 7. Alright, so there you go. It went all the way on nice and slick as easy. So looks good. So as it cools off, it will stick on there permanently. I don't feel like sticking my fingers on it right now, so I'm going to leave it alone. Alright, next thing I got to do, I got to put the chain shoe inside the primer here and put a bearing over here. So other things to deal with here. I also have to put a new bushing into the primary cover because I don't have one in that cover. So I'll do that also. So we already took the snap rings out of here. So this needs to be taken out. Now Fred got carried away, he took out both snap rings. You only have to take out one. And he got carried away. Let's see, I need sockets work good for beating on things. Now if I was to beat on that right now, it would destroy that bearing. So I don't want to use that one. And this one's probably too big. Oh, that one works just fine. And we're hitting on the steel. So we're good to go. See how tight that is. appears to be pretty tight. So we're going to have to press that one out. We'll have to beat on it a lot harder, which I don't want to do right now. Alright, so we're going to need a couple snap rings that are buried over here. Going to need a pair of pliers. Going to need a bearing and a seal. Okay, we're going to go take that over there in an important area and do some work. Alright, so I'm going to clean this up, shut everything off. We'll be back.